Hey folks, this is Blopple. Welcome to our second episode of the MatchCast series. We're going to try to use this series to experiment with more divergent list ideas, dive deep into list building and decision making, then jump into a match covering all of the big strategic choices throughout the game and how we can improve for next time. Today we've got some really cool lists and a match between the Republic and the Separatists. As we're getting set up here, you guys can enjoy the cat getting in the way of things. If you guys have a cat, I'm sure you know they love to be involved in whatever you're doing. So let's dive in and take a look at the lists. The first list up is Machine Spirit. This is Pace's list, and he's got Kraken on a Munificent with 3 Turbolaser Reroute Circuit Hardcells. This list can put out insanely consistent damage. The Hardcell can concentrate fire for 4 dice out of the front arc. TRC will fix one of them to a double hit. Kraken fixes another blank to an accuracy or a crit or whatever he's missing from his natural roll. It's pretty easy to get 5 damage and block the brace 3 times in a single turn and really put out some heavy damage on whatever you're focusing on. The Munificent's designed to push squadrons and soak damage and then clear it off with Wat Tambor and Battle Droid reserves. Let's take a look at my list for this game, Clone Gunline. Clone Gunline is a 5-ship list anchored by an Acclimator 2 with Obi-Wan as the commander. It's kit out as a battleship with ECM, Intel Officer, and Swivel Mount. It's also got Clone Gunner to bring in an accuracy, which it can tend to struggle with without it. ACM's not necessary, but it's nice when you're throwing blacks at long range. There's also 4 Consular armed cruisers to back up Obi-Wan. The triplets are all identical with Clone Nav Officer and external racks. And then the last one has Clone Captain Zach and the Swift Return title, as well as Auxiliary Shields team. You can drop Zach to another Clone Nav Officer and just run all 4 the same to spend more on squadrons if you wanted, because Clone Nav Officer is really the engine of this list. The idea here will be to use Clone Nav Officer to feed concentrate fire tokens out to all the ships that need it. Round 1, I'll usually take at least 2 concentrate fire tokens and then spread 2 more with the Clone Nav Officer. That way 4 ships will have concentrate fire right out of the gate, and the Acclimator can start triggering Clone Gunners right away. Apart from that, the cruisers are going to go fast, charge in, and blow external racks. If each one can get a single big attack and get out, that's basically what I'm looking for here. The cruisers have great anti-squad dice also, with 2 blue, so between that and my smaller squadron list of Lumiplo and 3 V19s, it should be pretty safe from a big squadron ball, and of course knowing Lumiplo and 3 V19s will really always punch above their weight. Both of our lists were 400 points, so we did a roll-off to determine initiative, and I won, so I selected to go second. My objectives were Surprise Attack, Jamming Barrier, and Volatile Deposits. I think Jamming Barrier is huge for a list like this. It's very, very good against Separatists right now because they focus heavily on red dice. Only the Munificent has, I think, 2 in its front arc. That's the most they can pull. So Jamming Barrier allows you to get into blue or even black range before taking much fire. Combined with Obi-Wan, basically what happens is, they throw 3 or 4 red dice, Jamming Barrier will cut that in half down to 2. Obi-Wan can redirect, and now you're only really taking 1 or 0 damage from a shot with just a single token. If you want to see this in action, the match that we did with the Unkenobiable list kind of gives you an effective way to play out Jamming Barrier against the Separatist fleet right now. Volatile Deposits is another great one for my list, considering I have a bunch of blue and black dice. The Seps have so few blue dice, they have no real chance of triggering the effect as first player, and the Dust Clouds also will help protect my fleet on the way into engagement. Surprise Attack's a great red objective. It throws a wrench into your opponent's plans, and this was the objective that Pace chose, so we'll be diving into that and our strategies to deal with Surprise Attack going forward. The first big decision with Surprise Attack is where you want to place the station. The opponent has to place his flagship overlapping the station, so this choice is critical. I like to place it close to one side of the map and as far away from the opponent's edge as I can. I want their flagship as far forward as possible and with limited support and movement options, hence the edge. We placed some rocks around the station, and with my obstacles, I tried to make it as uncomfortable as possible for their flagship to maneuver. Where would you place your flagship with this setup of obstacles on Surprise Attack? It could go like this, or over here, or like this. You see Pace trying a sideways deployment here, and I think this was probably the best option for him to head this way. Another choice he thought about was deploying as far back as possible, pointed ahead. This works well because it keeps the flagship as close to the rest of your fleet as possible. Pace actually selects a very aggressive option here for deploying his flagship, heading forward and away from the rocks. With this position though, he can push squadrons to strike my deployment zone on the first activation of the game. The downsides are that this flagship will be all alone since his whole fleet is limited to half of their max speed. What do you guys think of this reaction to surprise attack? Here we're going to speed through as much of this deployment as possible, and I'll pause if we see something super interesting to talk about. I like to start with a smaller ship. I don't want to give away where my acclimator is going to be right away, and he's going to start deploying his hard cells behind his flagship. So here I'm just deploying some squadrons, deploying more squadrons, and he's dropping his hard cells. He's actually not using his squadrons to buffer his deployments. And there's my acclimator, and look how close that it is to his flagship. It's really fantastic for me. I'm just out of red range, which is kind of exactly what I want. Since I have the activation advantage, I can kind of force his flagship to not have a shot and then move into my range, and I get to shoot at him. As we're wrapping up deployment, you can kind of start seeing the strategy that I've got going here. I've got a blocker cruiser off to the right over here, and I've got 3 cruisers on the left going speed 3 to kind of come around and flank him, and then my hammer, which is the flagship, slowly gonna move forward down the middle, pushing its squadrons forward as defense. I also place my surprise attack dials here. Since his fleet can only deploy at speed 2 and 1 for his flagship, I assumed he would try to nav the rest of his fleet to catch up, or maybe nav on his flagship to try to get out of range of my acclimator. I knew squadron activations were coming, so I put that on round 2, and then I figured by round 3 the hard cells would be in range for red dice attacks, so I put a concentrate fire raid on round 3. So Pace has his first activation here, and he actually did go for the squadron command, which, to be honest, I should have seen coming. I should have raided that instead of the nav, but I did deploy Luminara off to the left of the acclimator to kind of control that space around there to make sure he couldn't just pop in and start bombing my flagship on round 1. But that meant she couldn't protect the rest of the squadron, so he goes after the Torrents because they have escort. Luckily, Pace gets some pretty below average rolls with his initial squadron volleys, so it takes his entire squadron activation to kill just that one V-19. Pace throws some red flak at my squadrons here, does a little bit of damage with linked Turbolaser towers, and then he's going to move his flagship forward. Since he didn't nav, he was going right where we kind of predicted, and you can see me measuring there that I do have a nice red dice shot on his flagship right out of the gate turn 1, and I think a lot of people maybe would just take the open shot and activate their ship right away, but I really want to maximize this impact, so I'm actually going to go with my entire fleet and then kind of activate the acclimator last to take advantage of nav officer and get the concentrate fire tokens rolling. So we're going to go through this now. So I activate the blocker cruiser first, and you can see me getting some really nice flak off on his entire squadron ball there. And then I try to move him into position to prevent the Munificent from running off and getting out of range of my acclimator. Try to get the double arc on the way in here. I don't think I really did a good job of getting it, but that's okay. His main goal was just to be in the way of everything that Pace wanted to do on this match, right? Just gum up the works, prevent this Munificent from going anywhere, and flak and shoot and have a party. If he sacrifices himself for it, that's 50 points for winning the game, which I'm okay with. You can see Pace, he's gonna activate some squadrons from this hard cell and then kind of move it up as the rest of the turn proceeds along. And this turn from here on out is pretty straightforward until we get to the acclimator. This Corvette really should have been probably deployed at speed 2 for 2 reasons. One, he's just barely in range to give his concentrate token over for the acclimator to trigger clone gunners. And 2, now he's in range of these droid bombers who are going to come up and whack him on the next activation. Next time I need to remember that the closest cruiser should probably be going a little bit slower to stay with his buddies. So first I'll move another one of these flanking cruisers over, and then you're gonna see, this one takes some heat from these droid bombers. Pace actually uses Flight Commander to activate them after his maneuver, which wasn't really super relevant here, but as they push farther and farther forward, it'll be good to keep them being able to be activated. I also forgot to use Kenobi on my redirect to reduce the damage by 1, so a couple little flubs. I was thinking about a lot of different triggers at this point in the game, and it kind of slipped my mind. But we're almost at the end of round 1, and you can kind of start seeing my strategy unfolding on the board here. The gun line on the left is getting ready to flank his hard cells. The hard cells basically only have guns facing forward, so they need to decide to face my flagship or the gun line. Now that I've saved the Acclimator for last, I've got it a Concentrate Fire token, which is a requirement for clone gunners to go off. I've got a ship in range 5 that has another Concentrate Fire token to actually let clone gunners happen. We reveal the squadron command, and we start to punish Pace's over-aggression here. I clean up as many of these squadrons as I can with my superior firepower that's left, and then at long range I take a shot from the front of my Acclimator to the side of his Munificent. Base, I've got 3 red dice, plus I'm going to use swivel mount batteries to bring in another black dice, and then I can spend the Concentrate Fire on my flagship and then spend one on the cruiser nearby to add that blue accuracy. So I choose to block the brace, and Pace will redirect and salvo back. Since this is kind of the last shot of the activation, he feels free to spend all of his green tokens that he can. I should have remembered my Intel Officer upgrade, which is sitting right there, and I just totally blanked on it, because then I could have taken his redirect away forever. We're coming into round 2 here, and you'll have to forgive me because we forgot to activate the second raid dial, which I had set as squadron, until after Pace already activated a couple squadrons with the ship activation here. So yeah, but the rest of the ships all get a raid token, and the thing about Machine Spirit is it really has no way to generate extra tokens and deal with raids. So I think going forward, Pace probably won't be selecting something like Surprise Attack because it completely shut down his entire list. He also chooses to head to the right over here and land on a rock instead of coming in toward my cruisers because he has medical team and he was betting on getting a crew crit that he could just discard. My goal is to continue to trigger Clone Nav Officer and keep a couple of cruisers within range 5 of Obi-Wan to continue triggering Clone Gunners. The flanking squad is trying to flak down Pace's bombers as they continue to sweep around the edge of the battle. Pace activates his Munificent next, and critically doesn't have a double arc on my blocking cruiser. Between forcing him to waste his squadron activation with raid and splitting his fire between the cruiser and the flagship means that neither of my ships are in serious danger. I want to emphasize at this point again though, there's no reason for me to get trigger happy here now that he's moved this Munificent forward, to just suddenly start activating those ships that have a shot on it. I'm just going to continue delaying with my flanking squad until as many of his ships have moved forward as possible. This one cruiser in the middle with Clone Captain Zach I think pulls off a really nice maneuver here, dodging that rock and then getting in super tight onto his hard cell that has moved forward. It's going to get him set up for a really nice turn next with a double arc. And then Pace is going to activate this next hard cell, which will take an obstructed shot over to my blocking cruiser. It doesn't matter though, he'll still TRC and get 4 hits. And then now that kind of everything has activated, especially this cruiser that's gone forward, now is the time when it's optimum for me to activate this blocking cruiser. I'll decide to blow external racks on this shot. I'm trying to take down his flagship, obviously, and when you want to bring down a ship, especially a larger ship or a flagship, the best way to do it is to overheat their defense tokens and deal as much concentrated damage as you can in one turn. Once it attacks, I actually decide to not bump, which was kind of the original point of the blocker, because I see an opportunity to get some more value out of this guy. I actually move to jump behind the Munificent and get into the rear of one of these hard cells that have been moving forward to engage the rest of my fleet. This really wouldn't have been possible without the activation advantage that I've been talking about. Look at where his hard cell used to be. I would have taken a really nasty 4-dice shot with Kraken and TRC and probably lose that cruiser since it only had 3 health left. This game is actually kind of almost over now. Pace is going to activate this last Hardcell here. It'll take a shot out of the left arc at one of my cruisers, and then a shot out of the right arc at the other cruiser and kind of move forward. But what you'll notice once it moves forward here is the positioning that Pace is in is really kind of awkward. All of the Hardcells are moving forward. They've got shots at their rears from all of my cruisers, and then ahead of them is my Acclimator's huge front arc ready to just eat them for breakfast. Now my Acclimator will activate with a squadron activation. I actually think a squadron activation is almost always going to beat out a concentrate fire in terms of value as long as you have a squadron to activate. Of course, since I want to take advantage of clone gunners, I had to make sure that Obi-Wan and that nearby cruiser both have a concentrate fire token. My squadrons almost totally wipe the board with Pace's squadrons, and then I take a big front arc shot into the Munificent here. With 2 accuracy, I stop the brace, redirect, and punch through 5 damage to finish the flagship off. Pace actually concedes here with no squadrons left and no dice in the rear arcs of those Hardcells. He felt he had little hope of scoring any more points from this position. Reflecting back on this game, I think I can attribute a lot of the success that I had in this match to making sure that my fleet list and my objectives synergize really well together, to having a plan from the outset of the match on exactly what I wanted my ships to be doing each turn, and having the patience to wait for as long as possible for my ships to activate and counterattack after Pace was super aggressive. What did you guys think of this match between the Republic and the Separatists? What do you guys think of our list? I want to do more MatchCasts like these in the future, so if you guys have a list that you want us to try out or an objective that you want to learn more about, hit us up in the comments, give us your feedback, and thanks for watching.